The big experience for many Maritimers in the 1970s was going down the road to seek jobs and success in Quebec and Ontario. Now, a very important movie covered that, and it's called Going Down the Road. Now, if anybody has not seen this movie in Canada, I'd like to meet them. Imagine Midnight Cowboy, but with best friends and no sex. That's what Going Down the Road was. Now, as it started right now, this was the beginning of the Canadian tax break system where the government was funding movies. This 1970 film, directed by Canadian Don Shabib, was co-written by William Fruit and Shabib. It tells the story of two young men who decide to leave the Maritimes, where jobs are and fulfilling lives are hard to find, for the excitement and perceived riches of Toronto. It stars Doug McGrath, who later showed up in Pale Rider, Paul Bradley, Jane Eastwood, and Cale Shamin. Despite the small production budget, the movie, generally regarded as one of the best and most influential Canadian films of all time, has received considerable critical acclaim for its writing, directing, and acting. Now, in the movie, Pete and Joey drive their 60s Chevy Impala from their home at Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia to Toronto with hope of meeting up with their relatives in the city who might be able to help them find jobs. But their relatives hide from what they see as their pair's uncouth behavior, and the two are set adrift in the city. The men find jobs at a local ginger ale bottler for $80 a week, a job with tough working conditions that doesn't pay much better than what they could have had back home. They fill their days smoking, drinking beer, and hitting on young women along Toronto's busy Yonge Street strip. They soon turn to good fortune in a residency in a small apartment, which he decorated with centerfolds from men's magazines and movie posters. Both men start romances. Joey decides to get married when his girlfriend Betty becomes pregnant. With his new wife, pursues a credit-driven lifestyle undreamt of back home, buying a new color TV, stereo, and furniture, all in an installment plan. Now, disaster strikes when Pete and Joey get laid off at the end of summer, and the trio are forced to move to a smaller, less comfortable apartment. Pete and Joey find new jobs washing cars and resetting pins at a bowling alley, but at much smaller wages than what they received at the bottling factory. Tensions mount at a crowded living situation, and a lack of money begins to wear on them. And Betty tells Joey she will soon need to stop working at her waitressing job because she is pregnant. Pete accuses Joey of not making enough money to support his share of the costs, and Betty resents Pete for making the accusation. Now, unable to find steady work and with bills to pay, and Joey and Betty's baby on the way, they resort to stealing food from a local supermarket. Good product placement. The caper results in a grocery clerk being assaulted by the pair when he tries to prevent the robbery. Pete and Joey return to their apartment in the morning to find Betty gone and their possessions on the street after police came in search of them and their landlord evicted them as troublemakers. Now broke, homeless, wanted by the police for theft and assault, and with Betty staying with her aunt and uncle, the pair decide to pawn the rented color TV set for money in order to make it out to Western Canada. Pete convinces Joey that husbands leave their wives all the time, and Joey agrees to leave Betty and her unborn child in Toronto as she will slow them down. The film concludes much as it began, with Pete and Joey driving west in search of greener pastures. Now, mostly positive, some negatives in this movie, but McGrath and Bradley and Eastwood, at the top of their talents. This movie only cost $85,000, and it came off kind of like a CBC kind of a film reality. Bruce Coburn did the music as well, which is quite nice. Evdon Films production company with Chevron Pictures distributor, put out in July 2nd, 1970 in Canada, but it was also released in the States in October. Made $150,000 in the box office, but in sundry value, much more in second and third, releases on TV. Now, Going Down the Road was initially pitched to the CBC as the Maritimers as a television drama. Don Shabib received a $19,000 grant from the Canadian Film Development Corporation, and the budget of $85,000 is equivalent to about $600,000 in 2023. Now, it made about in 2021 dollars $1.1 million at box office in its first 2 months. Now, the New York Times stated that the film was the most impressive new work of realist cinema in years, and it won Best Feature Film and Best Actor at the 22 Canadian Film Awards, which doubled now as Canadian Screen Awards. Now, this 1970 movie has been referenced and even parodied through the years. SCTV did an interesting version, which Joe Flaherty and John Candy played the two key ones. Now, the film has since been designated and preserved as a masterwork by the uh, Audiovisual Preservation Trust of Canada, a charitable nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the preservation of Canada's audiovisual heritage. The TIFF Festival ranked it in the top 10 Canadian films of all time 4 times in 84, 93, 04, and 2015. In 2002, Readers and Playback voted the 5th greatest Canadian film of all time. Now, in 2010, Shabib announced that a sequel film was in production, and Down the Road Again was released in October 2011. Now, that movie takes a look at what happened to Joey and Pete. Now, Joey, in this movie, Joey has recently died in Vancouver, and Pete, who left Toronto with Joey after a violent incident, must return to the city to honor Joey's request that his ashes be taken back to Cape Breton Island. Betty Jo, Joey and Betty's daughter, joins him in the journey, driving across Canada the same 1960 Chevy Impala convertible that Joey and Pete used when he left home in 1970. Adding to the emotion of the trip, the Cape Breton homecoming turns out to be a surprising final gift to Pete from Joey. Pete reconnects with Betty, Selena, a special woman named Annie, and learns about Annie's son, Matt. Now, according to Shabib, until 2007, he had been reluctant to do a sequel to Going Down the Road, despite people asking about it for years. Finally, a different producer that actually ended up with, offered to try and help put it together. So if I thought somebody professional was going to try and do it, then let me sit down and try to find a story that makes some sense. And it came together surprisingly easily. Now, the budget for this movie was $2 million, mostly, I think, for Kathleen Robertson, a noted actress who's in 9210. Now, according to Jane Eastwood, Cale Sherman was a strong advocate, convincing director Shabib to make the sequel to the 70 film. When Sherman was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in June 2010, she chose to forego standard cancer treatments to stay active enough to reprise her Selena character. Sherman did not tell anyone about the cast or crew that she knew she had terminal cancer when they were filming, though McGrath had his suspicions. She was so thin, there was a frailty I hadn't seen before. Sherman died on 18 February 2011, 3 months after the project wrapped up in October 2010. Now, Shabib considered the script better than the originals. The original, Doug McGrath said when he first read Shabib's script, it was like reading my own history. I figured Pete had gone through a lot. Now, the Down the Road Again was shot with 30 or 40 man crew in 18 days for just $2 million, largely in Toronto, with Cherry Beach serving as the Atlantic Ocean as Joey's rashes are scattered. It was shot in 35 millimeter, unlike 16 millimeter of the original, with a full crew and a more composed style than the original, which is seen in flashbacks. It was completed in October 2010. Now, most critics said that the sequel did not do justice to the original film. Don Shabib and company are being worn up to the task, and the film superbly meshes an older generation with a new one. Assigning the film a 75 out of 10, he says McGrath is in fine form, and Kathleen Robinson commands her screen time well as McGrath's nuanced screen partner, conceding it may veer dangerously close to quick-cutter TV territory at times. Now, the Robertson and McGrath relationship, they enjoy a feisty comic rapport, and according to Stephen Cole, the film showcases Shabib's greatest storytelling talent, a tender honesty that brings characters alive. Now, you don't have to be for the Maritimes to enjoy this, but you have to be of a certain generation where people would, in Northern Brunswick, go to Moncton, work the CN shops, work construction, work in building Sobeys plants. From about 1968 to about 1982, that's what people had to do. They had to leave their hometown. And someone who would get involved in crime or getting women pregnant or come home and be ashamed and wouldn't leave the house. But the people who left, they never came back. That's the way it went. Anyway, so Going Down the Road, the original, 4 stars out of 5. The sequel, Going Down the Road Again, I've seen it, 3 stars out of 5. It's good to watch it back to back for a piece of CanCon Canadian movie history. If you like what we're doing here, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. Bye.